A Bowman Gray legend will get to race at the Clash. NASCAR is exploring the idea of rotating the championship race. Plus, Matt DiBenedetto will remain at Viking Motorsports, but the team's making some big changes. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. Scheduling update. I kind of like the idea of doing every other day at this point because news has slowed down a little bit. Once we get through the holiday season, I've got some other content ideas that I'll start to work in that are a little bit outside of the news. Some other things that I kind of want to explore this off season. But until then, we'll talk about the news as it comes up. Obviously, if something big happens, then we'll talk about it the same day. But let's start off with the biggest news that came out on Tuesday is the fact that Bowman Gray legend Tim Brown will be making his NASCAR Cup Series debut on February 2nd, technically February 1st, at the Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium. If you're not familiar, Tim Brown is an absolute legend of the Madhouse of Bowman Gray Stadium. 101 wins at the racetrack, 12 track championships. The guy is an absolute icon. Love him or hate him down there, the guy in that 83 car will continually be the person that you have to be. He, Burt Myers, Jason Myers, Chris Fleming, all of them, just legends of the Madhouse. And now one of them, that being Tim Brown, will get the opportunity to race in the Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium, which of course is the first time the Cup Series has been there since 1971. So Tim Brown, who also works at Rick Ware Racing, will be driving for Rick Ware Racing in the number 15 car, and he has the opportunity to advance himself into that feature, into that Clash on Sunday night, 8 p.m. on Fox, which would be really cool to see. I'm really happy that we see a guy that has spent so much of his life, dedicating so much of his life to Bowman Gray Stadium, to being the track champion there in the modified division. And now he gets the opportunity to race in the Cup Series. It's very cool that he is going to get that. If you remember, if you watched the Madhouse docuseries that was on Discovery, I believe, back in the day, Tim Brown was a big feature of that. At that point, he worked at Michael Waltrip Racing. So he's been a guy that's moved around amongst the Cup Series teams. So to see him get the opportunity now at a track where he's had an overabundance of success, or like when they went to dirt tracks and you saw guys like Bobby Pierce or Scott Bloomquist or others get the opportunity to race on dirt. And it's like, it's cool that you get to pay homage to, the track, the type of racing that you're going to, and include them in this big event, event that's bigger than what the track has ever hosted. And Bowman Gray Stadium hosting the Clash is going to be the biggest event that they've ever hosted before. So I'm really happy to see Tim Brown get the opportunity. Yeah, it's with Rick Ware Racing, but hey, who knows? Nobody knows their way around the track better than the guy that's won there the most. So maybe he can find a way to get into that Clash on Sunday night. Regardless, it's still just very cool to see at 53 years old, I believe is what Tim Brown's age is, that he's going to make his Cup Series debut at, again, the track where he's had so much success in his career. Moving into some stories from Monday, we have NASCAR, who is open to the idea, or at least is internally discussing the idea, according to Sports Business Journal, of moving the championship race around every year, a rotating championship race, which I would absolutely love. So, of course, for like 20 years, it was at Homestead Miami Speedway, and then they moved it in 2020 to Phoenix. And since then, it's been met with mixed reviews. Yes, the amenities in Phoenix are absolutely fantastic. Yes, they sell at the grandstand. It's 40,000, 42-ish, 42 to 45-ish thousand seats. They sell it out. That looks really good. Don't get me wrong. I understand the sellout sounds nice. It looks nice on paper. Everything that goes into that. NASCAR, ISC, International Speedway Corporation, put a ton of money into renovating that track. And Phoenix as a whole has really embraced having championship weekend there. All of that is great. All of that is exactly what you want out of a location. The downside, Phoenix hasn't hosted a good Cup race since it opened, like in 30 plus years. So there's been some okay ones, don't get me wrong, in there, but there's never been a race where you've left the season. At the end of the season, you've never looked back at any of the races and been like, Phoenix is in my top 5. You just haven't. Sorry, it just has not ever been a track that has produced very good racing. The Xfinity race there, it's okay. It's better than the Cup race, but it's still not anything that you're going to brag to your friends about. You're not going to be like, hey man, you really got to tune in for Phoenix this weekend. That line has never been uttered in terms of talking about motorsports. So NASCAR, at least, exploring the idea and discussing it internally of rotating that championship race. Love that. The NFL does that, right? The Super Bowl is not in the same place every single year. Yeah, it might rotate between, a handful of cities, but that's like on a 5 to 6 year basis, unless you're SoFi Stadium. But for NASCAR, they need to rotate this race around. Obviously, there are certain tracks that you can't go to the first week in November. You just can't. You're not going to New Hampshire. You're not going to Watkins Glen. You're not going to Michigan. Not going to Indianapolis. Stuff like that. I get it. But at the same time, there are still tracks that they could absolutely go to. Some of them just maybe aren't in like the most destination worthy places that you would want to travel to. Obviously, Kansas would put on an absolute banger of a race, but do we want to go to Kansas the first week in November? I don't think so. Yeah, it's actually not going to be that much different temperature wise than going to Martinsville, but it's still not a place where you're like, is that a destination people want to go to the first week in November? Phoenix at least is warm, or at least gives off the idea that it will be warm. Typically, it's still going to be chilly. So yeah, if you're talking about like, 55 in Phoenix, is 47 in Kansas really going to be that big of a difference? Not necessarily, and that would be a really good race. In the Sports Business Journal article, there was talk about, obviously, Phoenix, Homestead, NASCAR thrown out Las Vegas for ISC. Obviously, that makes a ton of sense. That is the ISC track that probably makes the most sense for hosting championship weekend. The Gen 7 car races really well on intermediates. The trucks race well there. The Xfinity cars race well there. It, of course, is in the entertainment capital of the world. It makes a lot of sense to have that race there. Obviously, you have to, factor in the fact that Formula One will also be having their Las Vegas Grand Prix sometime in the vicinity. Now, it's probably going to be about 2 weeks later than what the Cup, race will likely be on, or the championship weekend will likely be on. But it's certainly a factor that you have to consider. Two different types of fan bases. I get it. I'm just more talking about like just event planning and everything that goes into it. So that would make a logical choice. Some people would really like to see Charlotte as a championship weekend. I can get behind that. I understand it. Charlotte, of course, has been pretty steadfast in wanting to have the oval race in the spring and the road course race in the fall. We'll see if they would ever give into that. They absolutely would get rid of the Roval to have a championship race there. I think that's a given. Marcus Smith can say what he wants, but Marcus Smith, at the end of the day, is a businessman and knows how big that event would be. A track like Darlington would be really, really good to have a championship race at. Obviously, with all of its history in NASCAR and everything that goes into that, would be fun to see. And then, of course, you have tracks like Texas. I don't think anybody wants to see a championship race there other than maybe the people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but it's certainly a track that's there. Bristol, it's one of those iffy ones. You're getting up into the mountains. It could be a little bit chillier, but would be a really cool venue for a championship weekend. The problem is a place like Darlington, a place like Bristol, not the easiest places to get to necessarily, like in terms of airports. Yeah, you can fly into Knoxville and drive over. You can fly into Columbia and drive over. They're not travel destinations though, like a Phoenix is or Miami is at that. It would be great if NASCAR had a track in Southern California to go to, but alas, they don't currently have that there. So yeah, there's definitely some options out there. No, they should not go to Daytona. No, they should not go to Talladega for the championship race. That's absolute lunacy. People complain right now about how the champion is decided, and that race is at Phoenix, which is a driver's racetrack. Having it happen at Talladega in Daytona, and just imagine all your championship four getting taken out in a big wreck and then all going on to DVP, and then NASCAR has to determine the finishing order from that. Like, people would lose their minds. So yeah, I don't think that's a very good idea there. So we'll see what they decide to do. But I like the idea that they're at least considering it. And they kind of understand that, like, hey, listen, yeah, you do sell out Phoenix, but it's not a crowd pleaser outside of the 45-ish thousand people that are there on property for it. So we'll see what they do going forward. But I like the idea of rotating it. Now just maybe give us a 3-race championship round, and I would like it even more at that. So yeah, getting into the other news though, which was, I guess, kind of official on Monday, but had been talked about the week prior at that. That is the fact that Matt DiBenedetto will be returning to Viking Motorsports in 2025. He spent the majority of his season, I believe 28 out of the 33 races with Viking Motorsports in that number 38 car, and had okay success in a car that I think most people were like, yeah, dude, if they just finished the races, we're going to be happy about. He had 3 top 10 finishes. Only one of those came on a super speedway. So that's kind of impressive. The other 2 came at Iowa and 1 at Michigan. So, hey, they do have the ability to find speed in that car. Now, DeBenedetto returns for another season with Viking Motorsports, and their owner, Don Sackett, who I believe owns SciAps, which was a sponsor on Ryan Sieg's car, they will not have a partnership with the Siegs next year, with RSS in the Xfinity Series. They will instead switch over to be a Chevy team with an alliance with Richard Childress Racing, which makes sense. And honestly, shout out to Don, because in a Facebook comment, he kind of laid out the whole thought process behind moving over to Chevrolet. He said that they reached out to Toyota. They really liked what Toyota had to offer. Unfortunately, Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota did not have an engine for them. They were booked out for the 2025 season. Makes a lot of sense. So they, went back to Ford and were like, what can we do here? For an alliance with the Haas factory team in 2025, it's going to cost them $1.3 million. And that did not give them access to setup sheets, to data, to sim, anything like that. So essentially, Don, like, we're not going to learn anything from this, and ultimately wants to build this team up to, stand on its own 2 feet and have, a team there that can do everything and not have to rely on others. Also, the other downside with the Ford program is Ford doesn't supply parts. You're very much at the sole discretion of the Haas factory team, something else that they don't want to do. So they went over to Chevy. Now they're lined up with Richard Childress Racing. They'll field a car for Matt DiBenedetto, and this will allow them to get their feet on themselves and start to build this into a standalone race team, not one that is partnered and kind of comes out of the same shop as RSS and everything like that. They're moving into a new shop with this whole team. And I actually really like this opportunity for Matt DiBenedetto. I'm a Matt DiBenedetto hater. Hand up. Like, if you've watched any of the videos, you'll know that. I mean, in 2021, I'm pretty sure I trolled him. And not pretty sure. I definitely trolled him, calling him the first openly Christian pro-American driver. And that really sent the internet onto its head there for a while. But I think this is a really good landing spot for him. So I'm excited to see what kind of success they can have next year. Obviously, an alliance with RCR means that they're probably going to be fast as hell at super speedways. And DiBenedetto has proven to be good at super speedways. Had an opportunity before he got caught up in a wreck when he was driving the 95 Levine family racing car at Talladega. Should have won at Talladega with the Wood brothers in the 21 car. And then he parted the seas like he was Moses and allowed Brad Keselowski to go through to win that race. It was like, here you go, Brad, just go ahead and win. Brad's like, all right, thanks. Went on to win that race. He's a guy that can win. His only NASCAR win in the top 3 series came at Talladega in the truck series, which I still stand by the fact that that shouldn't have counted, but whatever, topic for a different day. So I think that he has the opportunity to at least put in good results next year. Now we'll see what can happen, but I like when a team gives you the information and they're like, hey, this is why we made the decision we do. Cool. Always like a peek behind the curtain there. So let me know in the comments what you think about Tim Brown running the Clash, NASCAR rotating the championship race, and Matt DiBenedetto going back for another season with Viking Motorsports in the Xfinity Series in 2025. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.